Welcome to True Echo, where real stories meet raw emotion, and justice often arrives in the most unexpected ways. Today's story unfolds in a glamorous Chicago hotel where one woman's arrogance meets a quiet storm of dignity, power, and poetic justice. Stay with us, you don't want to miss this. The Horizon Hotel gleamed like a diamond under Chicago's skyline. Its mirrored glass reflected power, wealth, and prestige, hiding behind it a world of whispered conversations and high society politics. Inside the grand dining hall, guests lounged beneath crystal chandeliers, sipping aged wine, draped in silk and confidence. Among them moved Elena Carter. To most, she was just another server, black slacks, crisp white shirt, black apron hugging her slim frame. Her natural curls were neatly braided back, her smile polite, her eyes steady. But beneath the surface, she carried a truth no one in the room suspected. Elena was the daughter of billionaire hotel magnate Richard Carter. And tonight, she wasn't playing heiress. She was playing observer. She'd taken the job 6 months ago, against her father's wishes. She wasn't interested in living off trust funds or being paraded around investor meetings. She wanted to understand the world from the ground up. Her father had reluctantly agreed, on one condition: no one could know who she was. It had been a revealing experience. Some patrons treated her with kindness. Others, especially the elite, looked right through her. They saw skin before they saw skill, uniform before they saw worth. But none prepared her for what was about to happen that night. From the moment Victoria Blake walked in, the air changed. The infamous influencer was known for her cruel streak: paparazzi shots of her yelling at flight attendants, viral clips of her berating baristas, and those Instagram captions that oozed superiority. Victoria didn't walk in. She arrived. 32. Platinum blonde. Dressed in an emerald gown so tight it seemed fused to her body. Her presence drew attention not for grace, but for tension. Whispers followed her like perfume. Phones subtly angled for shots. And Elena? She was assigned to Victoria's table. Perfect. Elena approached, shoulders straight, tray in hand. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Horizon. May I get you something to drink? Victoria didn't even look up. Sparkling water. No ice. Make it quick. I don't have all night. Elena nodded, calm, composed. As she walked back to the drink station, she could feel the stares. Not just from Victoria, but from the entire dining room. A black server. A white woman of status. The unspoken hierarchy was on full display. She returned with the water and gently set the glass beside Victoria's plate. But Victoria tilted it, on purpose. The glass toppled, splashing water across the tablecloth and soaking into Elena's uniform. Her shirt clung cold to her ribs. She froze for a fraction of a second, breathing through the heat rising in her chest. "Oh, for God's sake," Victoria muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is it really that hard to serve a drink properly?" Elena swallowed her pride. "I'm very sorry, ma'am." "Oh, spare me the act." Victoria's laugh rang out like cut glass. "Do they just hire anyone these days? You'd think a place like this could afford competent help." Tables around them hushed. Conversations faded. Elena dabbed the table with a napkin, her hands steady, her back straight. Victoria leaned in, her voice dripping venom. "Sweetheart, people like you don't belong in places like this. Fast food might suit you better." Elena looked up, just briefly. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes, they burned. "I'll bring a new glass," she said evenly. "No charge." And then she walked away. Not stormed. Not flinched. Walked. Back in the kitchen, her coworker Marcus glanced at her soaked shirt and tightened jaw. "You okay?" Elena nodded, her voice soft but fierce. "I'm good." She changed her apron and returned to the dining room. The whispers hadn't stopped. Victoria still lounged in her chair, phone in hand, smirk on her lips. And just when Elena thought the worst had passed, Victoria picked up a second glass, this time, red wine. And flung it. The wine hit Elena square in the back. Crimson splattered across her fresh shirt. The entire dining room gasped. Forks dropped. The jazz quartet paused mid-note. Victoria's laughter pierced the silence. "Oops," she said with mock innocence. "Maybe that'll teach you to be more careful." But she'd gone too far. In the far corner of the dining room, a man slowly stood. Sharp navy suit. Silver-streaked hair. Eyes like steel locked on Victoria. Richard Carter had seen everything. Richard Carter didn't speak. Not yet. He simply watched. Watched the way his daughter stood, drenched in red wine, her expression unreadable. Watched how Victoria laughed like it was all some kind of joke. Watched the room, how people shifted, whispered, some looked away, others lifted phones, their screens already capturing the chaos for the internet to devour. Elena didn't look at her father. She didn't need to. She felt him rise, felt the weight of his presence settle like thunder before the storm. Still, she didn't react. She turned and walked silently back to the kitchen, her footsteps slow, composed, every movement chosen. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed. She removed the second ruined apron, pressing her hands into the counter. Her breath came shallow now, more from rage than humiliation. She hadn't cracked on the floor, but here, behind closed doors, she could feel it, just under her skin. "I swear to God," Marcus whispered behind her, eyes wide, "if you tell me that woman lives to see dessert." Elena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because at that very moment, Richard Carter stepped into action. He didn't make a scene in the dining room. That wasn't his way. He walked to Daniel, the restaurant manager, and leaned in with a quiet command. Within seconds, Daniel approached Victoria's table with the kind of politeness that only masked grave seriousness. "Miss Blake," he said, "Mr. Carter would like to speak with you. Privately. If you'll come with me." Victoria arched a brow, already rehearsing the charm she'd need to smooth things over. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, sliding her phone into her clutch. "And who might that be?" "You'll find out soon enough," Daniel said with a practiced smile. "Please." She followed, curious but not concerned. After all, she was Victoria Blake. She'd smoothed over worse scandals before with a smirk and a post. She didn't know yet. Not really. Not until she walked into the private lounge and saw Richard Carter standing there. At first, she didn't connect the dots. She saw the tailored suit, the calm demeanor, the subtle glint of power in his posture, but she didn't recognize him. Then she noticed the sharp eyes. Eyes she had seen before. Only, they weren't his. They were Elena's. That's when her stomach dropped. "Mr. Carter," she said quickly, smoothing her dress. "Such a pleasure." "I watched everything," Richard interrupted. Her mouth stayed open a moment too long. "Everything?" she echoed. "The water. The wine. The comments." He took a step forward. "And the laughter." She flinched, not visibly, but enough. Look," she began. "I didn't know she was your daughter. That's supposed to change something." His voice was soft. Deadly. "No. I mean, I would have never," she caught herself, saw the look in his eyes. Her words crumbled like sand. Richard's expression didn't move. "You didn't see a person, Miss Blake. You saw what you assumed was a servant. Disposable. Beneath you. You thought you were putting her in her place." She spilled. Victoria tried again. "She didn't," Richard said, his tone slicing the air. "You did." Silence wrapped around the room like a noose. Victoria's practiced charm began to unravel. I can fix this, she said hastily. I'll post something. Apologize. Spin it a little. Say it was a misunderstanding. My followers will. Your followers, Richard cut in, don't concern me. My daughter does. Victoria's face flushed. She glanced at Daniel, hoping for rescue. None came. And for the record, Richard continued, voice calm but lethal, if she wasn't my daughter, my response would be the same. Because no one, daughter or not, deserves what you just did. Victoria dropped the mask entirely now. Are you saying you're banning me? I'm saying, Richard replied, you're no longer welcome at the horizon. Not tonight. Not ever. The silence rang like a bell. Victoria swallowed. You know who I am. I do, Richard said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And that's exactly why you won't be welcome in any of my properties again. The Horizon. The Lancaster. The Blue Rise chain in Miami. You'll be blacklisted. Quietly. Permanently. Victoria's throat tightened. She looked like she might cry. But no one in the room was moved. Daniel stepped forward and opened the door. Victoria's pride warred with panic. But there was no out. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. No smirk this time. No laughter. Just the weight of consequences chasing every step. Back in the dining hall, Elena moved through the tables again, this time with a fresh blouse and something else, dignity still intact. And something new too. Respect. People who had looked through her now looked at her. Not with pity, but with acknowledgement. She didn't need their approval, but it still meant something. At the service station, Marcus leaned over. You missed it. Your dad. He obliterated her. Elena smiled faintly. I figured. You okay? She paused. Let the question settle. Then she nodded. Yeah. I am. And this time, she meant it. Elena Carter stepped back onto the dining floor with her head held high, but not because she wanted to make a statement. It wasn't pride that drove her posture, it was clarity. There was no longer a need to pretend she hadn't been targeted, humiliated, or stripped bare in front of dozens of privileged strangers. Everyone saw it. And now they were watching to see what she would do next. She wouldn't give them drama. She wouldn't give them anger. She would give them grace. A quiet hush still lingered in the air, not heavy like it had been minutes ago, but charged with something new, respect, maybe even admiration. A few guests nodded as she passed, silent acknowledgments that required no words. A woman in a pearl necklace reached out subtly as Elena walked by, gently touching her hand with a whisper, you held your ground. That meant something. Elena simply smiled, soft and professional, and kept moving. At the far end of the dining room, Richard Carter watched. His expression had settled into something unreadable, stern as always, but beneath it was a father's deep, guarded pride. Elena didn't need him to step in. That was never the point. But he had anyway. Not as a billionaire. Not even as the owner of the hotel. As her father. She made her way toward him slowly, pausing between tables, checking on guests, her tray held with steady balance. When she finally reached him, they didn't hug. That wasn't how either of them operated. Their connection was built differently, on earned trust and mutual respect. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly, her voice low enough not to draw attention. I know, Richard replied. But I wanted to. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the polished veneer of luxury surrounding them disappeared. She was no longer just a server. He was no longer the billionaire. They were just Elena and her father, two people who had long tried to navigate the line between privilege and principle. You still want to finish your shift? He asked. Elena exhaled softly. Of course. Because if I don't, she glanced around the room. Then she wins. Richard's lips tugged into a rare, soft smile. That's my girl. She nodded and turned away. But just before she left, he added one more thing, almost too quiet to hear. She didn't break you. You were already unshakable. Back at the service station, Elena picked up another tray and resumed her rounds like nothing had happened, only now, everything had. Something had shifted. Not just in the way people looked at her, but in the way she felt in the space she'd chosen to work. Not out of necessity. Out of purpose. Jamal, one of the newer servers, approached her with a slight grin. Yo, Lena. You should have seen her face when your dad walked in. Like someone unplugged her Wi-Fi. Elena snorted quietly. I don't care about her face. I care about mine. He raised an eyebrow. So you're staying the whole shift? She shot him a glance. You thought I'd leave over a little wine? Jamal laughed, shaking his head. Respect. The rest of the evening passed in a strange balance. There were no more incidents. No more public spectacles. But Elena noticed how conversations shifted as she passed, how guests smiled more kindly, asked for her name, thanked her more intentionally. It was odd, but not unpleasant. It was like people were seeing her for the first time. Even the staff had changed. Marcus handed her a hot tea halfway through the dinner rush. No words, he said, placing it beside her. Just keep going. By 10 o'clock, the dining room began to thin. The jazz quartet rapped their final number. Plates were cleared. Silverware polished. The hum of conversation faded into the luxury hush that Horizon was known for. Elena stepped out onto the small terrace near the kitchen. It was quiet there, just the distant noise of Chicago traffic and the muffled jazz still playing faintly from inside. The air was cool, not cold, and smelled faintly of city smoke and lavender from the rooftop garden. She let out a long, deep breath. Then she heard a voice behind her. Familiar. Soft. Male. I almost forgot how strong you are. Elena turned. It was Daniel, the restaurant manager. Not flashy like the patrons. Not loud like the influencers. But solid. He'd worked for her father for nearly a decade. And while they never talked much beyond work, there had always been a quiet understanding between them. I'm not strong, she said, arms crossed. I'm just tired of swallowing things. You didn't swallow it tonight, he said. You stood still. That's stronger than screaming. She glanced at him. Was it bad? I've worked here 12 years, he said. I've seen guests throw tantrums over forks. I've seen staff humiliated and let it break them. But tonight? He paused. You handled it like you owned the place. She smiled at that. I just wanted to see how people really act when they think you're no one. And now you know. They stood in silence a while longer, the city lights blinking beneath the dark velvet sky. Elena didn't know what would come of this. If the incident would blow over. If Victoria would retaliate online. If the videos already circulating would turn her into a headline or a symbol she didn't ask to be. But none of that mattered tonight. Tonight, she'd stood in the fire. And she'd stayed standing. Back in the kitchen, staff whispered in corners, screens glowing with what had already become a trending video. The clip was short, only 8 seconds, but it captured everything: the flick of Victoria Blake's wrist, the arc of crimson wine, the moment it splashed across Elena's back, and the stunned silence that followed. Someone had even caught the tail end of Richard Carter's command to have Victoria escorted out. Elena's face wasn't clear in the footage, but her posture was unmistakable, calm, straight, utterly composed in the face of humiliation. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She'd simply walked away, drenched but unbroken. And now, the world was noticing. Yo, Lena, Jamal said, rushing into the break room with his phone, "You're on Twitter, girl. Trending. Hashtag Winegate, no joke." She rolled her eyes. "You're kidding." "Nope. Look." He turned the screen toward her. The post had already crossed 600,000 views. Entitled "Influencer Humiliates Black Waitress, Until Billionaire Dad Steps In." Hashtag Winegate, hashtag Elena Carter, hashtag Daughter of the Boss. Elena blinked. Her name wasn't supposed to be out there. She had carefully worked 6 months to avoid being associated with Richard Carter in any way. But one incident, one spill, and one viral video had unraveled that entire plan. Her jaw tightened. "Who leaked my name?" Jamal shrugged. "Don't look at me." "But your dad's face is in the video. And someone on Reddit matched it up with his Forbes profile in like 20 minutes. "Of course they did," Elena muttered. Marcus entered then, holding his tablet. "Elena," he said, more gently than usual, "we're getting media inquiries. Already had 2 calls from local news. TMZ pinged the front desk asking if we'd comment." "I don't want to be a story," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't do anything heroic." Marcus gave her a long look. "Maybe not. But you did something rare. You stayed calm when the whole room wanted blood. That matters." She sighed, sitting down on a bench near the lockers. Her shoulders ached. Her head was buzzing. She'd only wanted to learn how the world worked when it didn't know your last name. Instead, she'd become a headline. She wasn't angry at her father. He'd done what any decent man would do. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't how she wanted the story told. Just then, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She picked up, expecting more press. "Elena?" Her spine straightened. "Yes. This is Maya Benton from the Morning Stream. We'd love to have you on the show to talk about your experience." "I'm not interested," Elena said, cutting her off. "I didn't do it for attention." There was a pause. "That's exactly why people want to hear from you." She hung up. Outside the door, she heard voices. Guests lingering. Whispers about the wine. About Victoria. About her. She stood and looked at herself in the mirror. Her curls were neat. Her uniform fresh. But her eyes, they were tired. Not from the work. From the weight of it all. And yet, beneath the fatigue, was something stronger. Resolve. She wasn't just going to finish the shift. She was going to own it. By midnight, the dining room was almost empty. Elena had handled her last few tables flawlessly, steady hands, clear voice, not a single tremor betraying the whirlwind inside her. But as the last guest signed their check and stood to leave, something unexpected happened. He turned back. An older man, early 60s, elegant but not flashy. He looked directly at her and said, "I watched what happened earlier. And I just want to say, thank you. For reminding all of us what real strength looks like." Elena blinked, momentarily stunned. She smiled. "Thank you, sir." As he left, she felt a warmth spread through her chest, not the kind that begged for applause, but the kind that came from being seen. Daniel approached, removing his name tag. "Your dad's still in the lounge," he said. "I figured. He told me to let you know he's proud." She nodded slowly. "I know. And, there's one more thing." He stepped aside. And standing just behind him was her father, not in a suit anymore, but in a black dress shirt and gray slacks. Still polished, but less imposing. "I figured we could talk," he said. She followed him back into the lounge. This time, it wasn't formal. No sharp tension. Just the soft hum of night lights and the view of Chicago's skyline. "You didn't have to do that," she repeated softly. "I did," he said. Because while you were learning how the world sees you without my name, I was reminded of who you are, regardless of it. She sat beside him. What now? He was quiet for a moment. Then, you keep going. Keep working. And when the noise fades, when the hashtags disappear, you'll still have what matters. She looked at him. Which is? Character, he said simply. You don't earn that by being born rich. You earn it by surviving moments like tonight, and walking back out with your head held high. She didn't answer right away. Then I guess I'm richer than I thought. Richard laughed, deep and genuine. And in that quiet moment, under the glittering skyline, father and daughter sat together, not as billionaire and heir, not as owner and waitress, but as two people who had just witnessed the world crack open and reveal something unexpected. Dignity has more power than money ever will. The next morning arrived with a storm of headlines. Elena Carter, waitress, billionaire's daughter, class act under fire. Hashtag Winegate blows up, entitled influencer humiliates hotel heiress unknowingly. Richard Carter's daughter soaked in wine, then served her abuser dignity. The internet had done what it always did, devoured drama, crowned its heroes, vilified its villains, and started a digital war in the comments section. TikTok edits of the moment wine splashed across Elena's back were racking up millions of views. Opinion pieces emerged within hours, some applauding her poise, others calling out the larger issue of racial bias and service industry abuse. Elena watched it unfold in silence, sitting at her small breakfast table, tea cooling beside her. She hadn't asked for any of this. And yet, there it was. Her face plastered across news segments and thumbnails. Strangers were dissecting her posture, her silence, even her clothing choices like they were scholars decoding a hidden message. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Publicists. Agents. Activists. Influencers. People she didn't know suddenly wanted to collaborate. One brand even offered her a modeling contract for how beautifully you wore that wine. She almost choked laughing. Richard texted her only once that morning. You handled it better than I ever could. Proud doesn't even cover it. Dad. Elena didn't respond immediately. She stared at the screen for a long time. She'd wanted to remain anonymous. To understand what it meant to earn respect without her last name being her first credential. But now, the world knew. And she couldn't undo it. By noon, her inbox held over 24 interview requests, including one from the New York Times. Every subject line promised dignity, empowerment, platform. But it was her friend Simone's message that finally made her pause. I know you didn't want the spotlight. But you need to understand what this meant to people who look like us. You didn't just take a hit with grace, you showed them how we carry power in silence too. Don't let the world twist this into a viral moment. Claim it. Elena stared at the message, her chest tight. That was the real dilemma. She could ignore it all, retreat into the shadows again, let the hype die off and return to being invisible. Or, she could speak, not for clout, not for followers, but for the black and brown women who had been humiliated quietly for decades and never had anyone watching. She got up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the bustling street below. Somewhere down there, people were rushing to work, servers tying aprons, bussers filling water glasses, maids changing linens. The silent army of workers who kept luxury moving. And she had been one of them. Still was, in some ways. Her decision wasn't for her. It was for them. 2 days later, Elena sat on the rooftop of a small media studio in Chicago with a city reporter from Windy Voices, a local digital outlet known for integrity over spectacle. The journalist, a black woman named Denise, had met Elena on Elena's terms: no lights, no makeup, no glam team. Just a conversation. I'm not here because I want to be famous, Elena began. And I'm not here because I need sympathy. I'm here because something ugly happened that wasn't about spilled wine. It was about power. And how people think they can wield it. Denise nodded. When the wine hit, why didn't you react? Elena took a breath. Because I've learned that sometimes, silence speaks louder. Screaming might have made me feel better in the moment, but it wouldn't have made her smaller. My dignity was never in how I responded. It was in not letting her take anything from me. What do you hope people take away from this? That titles don't define humanity. That you should never assume someone's worth based on the uniform they wear or the skin they're in. I've worked beside people who make minimum wage and carry more grace than people with 7 houses. The interview was raw. Real. And it spread faster than any viral clip. Within 48 hours, brands that had ignored diversity initiatives quietly sent feelers. Universities wanted her to speak. Nonprofits wanted her as an ambassador. One senator even quoted her interview during a televised hearing on racial discrimination in the service industry. Elena didn't bask in it. She didn't pivot to influence her life. She went back to work. 3 days after the wine incident, she was back at the Horizon Hotel, black uniform pressed, curls braided tight, name tag on. When she walked into the employee lounge, everyone froze. Jamal stood first and mock bowed. All hail the Queen. Laughter broke the tension. Even Marcus clapped. But Elena just grinned. Let's get to work. They fell in step behind her, and for the first time since she'd taken the job, no one looked through her. Because now, everyone saw her. Despite the viral storm swirling around her, Elena insisted on maintaining normalcy. She clocked in. She cleaned tables. She reset silverware. She even stayed late to help with inventory after a supplier mishap, because, in her eyes, that's what leadership looked like, consistency when no one was watching. And ironically, now everyone was. Guests came not just for the food, but to catch a glimpse of the waitress who didn't flinch. Some asked for her section specifically, others left generous tips with handwritten notes. For your dignity. Thank you for showing my daughter what strength looks like. The way you stood there meant more than you know. Still, Elena never let it inflate her ego. Her pace remained steady, her service sharp. But inside, she carried a fire, not of vengeance, but of clarity. Because behind the scenes, things had changed. Victoria Blake had gone silent on social media. Her management team issued a vague apology citing a misunderstanding during a stressful evening, but it didn't land. Her follower count plummeted by the tens of thousands. Sponsors began distancing themselves. The public wasn't interested in excuses, they'd seen what happened. And the hotel? The Horizons board quietly reached out to Richard Carter to suggest a public statement. He declined. The moment already spoke louder than any press release could, he told them. Instead, he made a different move. He called Elena into his office on a quiet Monday afternoon. No cameras. No fanfare. She arrived in her uniform, hair pulled back, clipboard in hand. Sit, he said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite his massive desk. Am I in trouble? She joked. On the contrary, Richard replied, steepling his fingers. I'm giving you a promotion. Elena blinked. I'm not ready to run a hotel. You're not running it, he said. But you are going to be overseeing a new program we're launching, designed by you, led by you. Frontline Equity Initiative. A mentorship pipeline for employees from marginalized communities who want to rise through the hospitality ranks. No fluff. Real training. Real access. Real promotions. She froze, caught off guard. Richard leaned back. You wanted to see the world from the ground up. Now you get to reshape it. A beat of silence passed between them. Then Elena said, I'll do it. But only if the employees have a voice. Not just handouts, authority. His smile deepened. That's exactly why I picked you. She left the office with a new badge, assistant manager, equity and development, and a burning sense of purpose in her chest. News of the promotion spread through the horizon like wildfire. She went from server to exec overnight, Jamal said, eyes wide with awe. It's like a Netflix origin story. But Elena never flaunted it. She still cleared tables when needed. She still worked Saturdays. But now, she also led workshops, advocated for pay transparency, and began reviewing hiring practices with HR. And something remarkable happened. People started talking, to her, to each other. Servers opened up about experiences they had buried. Cooks came forward about being overlooked. A young valet named Jose told her, I didn't think I'd ever move beyond parking cars. Now I'm applying to guest services. She made space. She listened. She pushed for change from within. One evening, as she stepped out to the terrace for a breath of fresh air, she saw a small crowd gathered near the restaurant's entrance. Curious, she approached, and froze. It was Victoria Blake. She looked nothing like she had that night. No makeup. No entourage. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and eyes that were far too tired for a woman in her 30s. Security stood nearby, uncertain. I just want to speak to her, Victoria said, catching sight of Elena. 1 minute. Please. Elena hesitated, then nodded. It's okay. The guards backed off. Victoria stepped forward, visibly smaller than before. Her voice was low. I came to apologize. Not for cameras. Not to fix my brand. Just because it's been eating at me. Elena remained quiet. I was awful to you, Victoria continued. And not because you did anything wrong. But because I could. Because I thought you had no power. That's what scares me the most, that it took learning your name to realize you deserved respect. Elena's voice, when it came, was calm. You're not the first person who saw a uniform and assumed the worst. Victoria swallowed. But I might be the first who had to face it this publicly. Elena nodded slowly. Maybe that's the point. Victoria looked down, then back up. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just wanted to say, thank you. For not lowering yourself. You made me look at myself in a way I never have before. Elena didn't reply immediately. Then she said, change doesn't come from a moment. It comes from who you are after the moment fades. Victoria gave a tiny nod, then turned and walked away, this time without fanfare. Without laughter. Just silence. And maybe, finally, self-awareness. As Elena watched her disappear into the Chicago night, she realized something. This wasn't just about what had happened at table 17. It was about every table like it. Every hallway. Every interview. Every missed opportunity because someone had been judged by the color of their skin, the weight of their accent, or the style of their uniform. And now, maybe, one of those tables had been flipped. For good. Weeks passed. The media buzz faded, the hashtags cooled, and the internet moved on, as it always does. But what remained were the roots that Elena Carter had planted. The Frontline Equity Initiative officially launched across 3 Horizon properties, then quietly expanded to the company's flagship resorts in New York, Atlanta, and San Diego. Elena had insisted on real results, mentorships, promotion paths, language-accessible training, mental health resources for staff. And Richard Carter gave her full support. She no longer worked the floor regularly, but whenever a team was short, she stepped in. To her, nothing was beneath her. That was the difference between her and the people who had underestimated her. One Thursday morning, she stood at the back of a staff orientation, watching a group of new hires take their seats. Among them, a middle-aged black woman who looked nervous as she adjusted her apron, a young Filipino man who clutched a notepad with shaking hands, and a trans woman with a quiet smile and bright eyes. Elena saw them all. Not just their uniforms. She stepped up to the front. "I'm not here to lecture," she began. "I'm here to say one thing. Dignity is not something people give you. It's something you carry, even when no one else recognizes it." The room hushed. "And if someone throws wine on you?" Metaphorically or otherwise, a ripple of laughter broke through the room. "You wipe it off. You stand taller. And you keep moving. Because they might control the moment, but you control the story." Applause followed, not out of obligation, but connection. That evening, Elena sat with her father in the rooftop lounge. The sun had just dipped behind the Chicago skyline, painting the buildings in shades of fire and gold. The city looked like it was exhaling after a long day. They clinked glasses, sparkling water, no ice. Richard chuckled. "You've built something I couldn't have, you know." She looked at him, eyes soft. "I'm just doing what you taught me." "I didn't teach you this, Elena. I gave you money. A name. But you took it and turned it into meaning. That was all you." She smiled quietly. "I just wanted to know who I was, without the Carter name. And now? Now I know," she said. "I'm Elena Carter. Billionaire's daughter, sure. But more than that, I'm the girl who wore wine like a crown and didn't flinch." He raised his glass. "To never flinching. To standing tall even when soaked," she added. They drank. Below them, the Horizon Hotel glowed, a symbol not of wealth, but of resilience. Elena didn't need the world's applause. She had something stronger now. Purpose. And from this rooftop, this city, this story, she knew one thing above all. You don't need a title to prove your worth. You only need the strength to never let someone else define it for you. In a world where perception can outweigh reality, Elena Carter reminded us that true power isn't in status, it's in how you carry yourself when no one knows your name. She didn't need to expose her identity to be respected. She stood in silence and let the world reveal itself. As Elena once said, they might control the moment, but you control the story. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please subscribe to True Echo, where stories of dignity, justice, and strength rise above the noise. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know, when was the last time you stood your ground with quiet grace? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful True Echo.